Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast. I'm Joshua.
I'm Kim. Let's dive in. Welcome back
to the podcast. Our new recording platform has a little countdown. So when we press record, it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And generally we don't talk during that time. But this time we were making comments on each other's appearance or our own appearance on the cameras.
Yes.
So we started and both of us were like, oh no, we're in the middle of a sentence. But welcome to the show. And if you see shininess on us, that's what we're talking about. We're glowing with the glory.
That's funny. Josh, you have a topic today. What is it?
I do have a topic today. So we have several times shared things from our life, and we have some people who leave really great comments that share things from their lives. But I wanted to talk about the importance of sharing those things, because, well, here's my premise for it. If something happens to you and you don't share that with other people, that thing really only exists in you. But once you share it, you're creating energy around it, you're creating connection with other people, and you're solidifying the existence of that thing. And so, like, you know, in normal church circles, we would call it like your testimony, like, oh, share your testimony. But that's actually really important because you're making it more real every time you share it. And I just think that that's like, it's a simple thing, but I think we should be aware of it.
I tend to agree, especially with like revelation and how you're growing and the things you're learning and those kinds of things. But what do you think about like when negative things happen?
I think what you're doing when you share something is you are solidifying it. So if something negative happens and you go and share it all the time, everywhere, with everyone you see, I think you're solidifying it. I think you're making it more real. You're giving it more energy. Like, I think on a quantum level, you're literally pulling existence into that statement.
Yes.
And I think that's why it's really important to share the wins, to share your story. I think that's why this podcast has been important for us, is because it forces us to constantly be sharing what's going on in our life, what we're learning, and it's like bringing it more out of the existence of the thought realm into actual existence and changing the way we live and function because of what we're sharing. But I think it's why it's important to guard your words, because you can just as easily make death and decay real as you can life and healing real by the words you speak.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth in that. Here's an example of something that I've practiced for a long time, is like regarding my health. I had a diagnosis like 8 years ago for an autoimmune condition, but I refuse to say I have it because I don't actually think it's mine. I don't want it.
Right.
I don't want to make it part of who I am. Like, this has been spoken over me, and I'm dealing with things that are happening concerning it, but I won't actually claim it. You know what I mean? Like, I won't say I have this.
Right.
See, I still won't say it.
Yeah. I think it's smart.
Because I think my body believes it too.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it does. It puts energy on it. Okay, but then let me also ask this question. I feel like I'm just challenging you today. So, hello, welcome to the show. Okay, so I also agree about if you're talking about negative things, you're just putting energy on it. And I really do think a lot of that, if you focus there, you're going to perpetuate it, right? Just like with good and life-giving things, but also with negative things. But I also think sometimes just getting it out and being able to say it can also be like the nail in the coffin to that thing.
Sure.
To get past it. You know what I mean? Like, can you just get it out so you can get over it, so you can get past it? If you're just getting it out so you can talk about it over and over again and so you can dwell on it, I think that's different than here's this energy. It is pent up. It is swirling, swirling, swirling. I need to get it out. It needs to be released so I can keep going. Do you know what I mean? What do you think about that?
No, I definitely think that there is life in letting energy get out of you. But I think it is what you continually dwell on. So, because I also think that authenticity is really important. And if your body really doesn't feel good, saying, "Oh, I'm healed and I'm living the best life," like your body knows you're lying. And I don't think you're really creating much when you do that.
It's also not creating trust with your body.
So maybe in that circumstance, saying, "And I actually really feel pretty bad today," might be really helpful. I actually have a friend who we were talking about this, and he was talking about having a cold, and he goes, I like started to have cold symptoms, and he's like, instantly I wanted to be like, "No, I rebuke this. I'm not having cold symptoms." He's like, I wanted to stand strong in that. But he goes, I didn't feel good. So I just said, I'm having cold symptoms right now. And it was like the acknowledging of that, or like, I'm having cold symptoms right now, and I don't think I need to. And he was like, almost instantly, my body was like, oh yeah, like we do feel bad, but you're right. We don't have to. And I don't know if that always works, but it was something that this particular friend was experimenting with. Like, how much control do I actually have? And it's that, it's that inner conflict. My wife Bree is, I don't know if I'd say a student. She's interested in this thing called German New Medicine. And it's a thought process that every sickness, disease, injury that we deal with is created through an internal conflict. And so it's like your body is trying to decide, is this correct or is this correct? And the result is like, because there's conflict and there's instability, you get some sort of a symptom. And I think that happens a lot where we are like, we're not being authentic, we're not being real with ourselves. And so we're creating this internal conflict. And so part of like what I'm saying and sharing your testimony and making it real is like, it's got to be something that you experience, something that you walk through, something that happened to you. And then as you share it, your body's like, oh yeah, that did happen. And it's like, you are creating that felt sense, that story of what happened, and you're living that. And the same thing can happen with negative things. If you are like, man, I went through this experience and it was really hard, really painful. If you sit there and everywhere you go, you retell that story, you're bringing more and more existence to the negative story. And I think sometimes that's where like victim mindsets tend to happen. Like maybe one time something happened where you really were taken advantage of. Like you really were a victim in a situation. But because something in you got stuck there, then you look for that in every situation. And all of a sudden you see it in every situation where maybe it didn't really exist.
Yeah.
And so I think that is like, that's part of the authenticity is also self-awareness, to be like, okay, yeah, that happened, but is that the narrative I want to create in my life? Like, yeah, right now, personally, I actually feel like I have like allergy symptoms and I don't really want that, but it is how I feel at the moment. And so what am I going to do? Like, what do I do with that? Do I sit in the, like, I'm healed, I don't have to worry about this, there's nothing wrong? Or do I just say, yeah, my eyes feel puffy and irritated and I'm sneezing sometimes, like, and then move on? Like, you don't have to sit in that story. You don't have to sit in that energy, but you can acknowledge it and allow it to move through you.
Yeah. I keep thinking back to the first time we had Dr. Craig Farney on. I think it was the Wizard of Oz. Isn't that what you called him?
I think so.
And there was like this takeaway that I got, and it had to do with energy that comes to you and you send back out. Like, even if you have negative energy coming to you, or I would say in this case, negative energy that is stored up and pent up and needs to be released, I think that we have the ability to be aware enough and conscious enough to make that something else, like to transform that negative energy into something that will serve us well. So, yeah, you might really feel crappy because you have allergy stuff going on and it doesn't make your body feel great. But what if you also decide within your mind, will, and emotions, but also in agreement with your body that, hey, this is serving a purpose, but let's turn this into something that's really going to serve us well. You know what I mean? I don't know necessarily what that's going to look like. You could also go lay down and take a nap, which would serve your body well.
Right.
But what if you just like really embrace the oneness and turn something that could be negative, could also be positive, into something that's super life-giving? Like, I do think that we have the ability and we are powerful enough with how we're built in our consciousness, in our body, in our spirit, to turn that into something really, really beneficial and really life-giving.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even in the sharing, like if you're sharing the negative crap, right? Like, oh, Josh, this happened today and it was a terrible day, whatever.
Right.
I could share it like that and then I could sit in the muck. I could also share it like that and have all of me determined that that's not going to define the day. Right. And that that's not going to define how I operate going forward.
Yeah. I mean, I think very much so. We have the ability to alchemize the energy to make it something else. And so, like, I think one of the cool things about energy is like it sits on, I don't know, it sits on a teeter-totter, and on one end of it is energy that your body is having a hard time processing, and the other side of it is an energy that is full of life. And it's the same energy, though. It's just, what side of the fulcrum are you sitting on? And I think that happens a lot, and I think we get to experience with that. Like, we get to play with that. And so you can take a tough situation, you can take a horrible situation, and you can just take I have allergies today and it doesn't feel great, but you can make it something amazing. Like, you can choose to do something different with that same energy. You can pull that energy to the other side of the fulcrum.
Yeah. It's really interesting because you could also choose to just sit in the middle of the fulcrum and not let it affect you at all. But there's energy there. And so you do get to decide, like,
Right.
do you want it to swing this way? Do you want it to swing that way? Or do you want it to have no effect? You can choose that. And I think it's an interesting thing how we're built, because we're definitely conductors, and energy that is around us gets absorbed and then sent back out through us, right? That is kind of a conductor. But also we can be a transformer. If we choose to be aware of it, we can, regardless of what kind of energy comes in, it can be transformed into something that is life-giving. It can also be transformed into something that is really not life-giving. Yeah. Have you ever known anyone who's like super negative? Like, it doesn't matter. They could win the jackpot on the lottery and there would still be some horrible thing. Like, you can have energy that you just always turn negative. But I think it's cool because we get to choose to do that. Well, and you really can see things shift from that.
You can. One of my thoughts was, like, you hear people say, well, I'm just naturally, like, that's who I am. That's just naturally who I am. I'm not a happy person. I'm, blah, blah, blah. But I don't agree with that. Like, I think it's possible that your genetics that you were passed down leaned a certain way. But I'm actually a big believer that your genetics can be, your genome, the different pieces can be turned on and off by how you choose to live your life. And it's not necessarily easy if you've lived a unconscious, turned off life the whole life, to all of a sudden start taking responsibility for that again. But it is real. And if you want a different life, you can create a different life.
For sure.
It may not be easy and it may take some time, but you're not stuck in who you've always been.
That's so good. I also can't help but think of, I don't actually tend to be this way. And so maybe this is not the most informed way to say this, but I think of people who are super empathetic. Sorry, I said empathetic, not just super pathetic.
Yeah.
Empathetic.
Yes.
Who are empaths. And how, like, you kind of have a natural bent toward being a sponge and picking up on other people's energies. But I think that where the consciousness in this comes and where the awareness comes is also being able to release that energy. So not necessarily just having it come in and stay there, because then you wind up carrying all kinds of energy that was never yours to begin with.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that can really mess with your body and your mood and all of the things. But really being aware of it and knowing, yes, this comes really naturally to me, but I can also release that. I can change that into something good and release it back out. And then that flow comes in. And I think it's like, what a gift to have that, because it's almost like it'll come more naturally to be able to transform it too. Right. Some of us have to really work at it,
Yeah. I just think that there is we have an opportunity to really take back our life. Mm-hmm. We have an opportunity to really make choices and to be who we want to be. And to really be it, not just pretend, but like really be who you want to be. And as you go on that journey, who you want to be might change. Because as you start to, like, if you were just dreaming about your future right now, you might say, oh, I really want this and I really want that. But then as you get there, you're like, oh, that's not actually what I wanted. And so you start digging into the root of like what it is you really want. And as you get more to that realness of what you really want, you will you'll be able to create better because you'll be more clear on your vision. And so, I want to create a invitation for our listeners that if you really want to share your story, leave us a comment, send us an email, connect with us through Discord, however you do it, because we would love to hear your story and we would love to help you solidify who you want to be.
That's good. Good stuff today.
Yeah.
Sharing is caring, Josh.
Sharing is caring most of the time. Not necessarily always.
Okay, that's true. It's true. Okay, well, thank you guys for listening. Thanks for being along on the journey with us. So many times you get like the very real us processing things version of us. And it's not always the easiest thing to do. Today wasn't hard, but it's not always the easiest thing to do. But I just appreciate people kind of being along on the journey.
Yes, very much so. Yeah. Thank you guys for being here.
Yep. See you next time.
See you.
Hey, thanks for listening. Keep up with us along this journey by liking, subscribing, and becoming a member through YouTube.
Members get exclusive access to bonus content with our guests, deeper dives into topics, and a look into other projects. We're glad to have you here. See you next time.